Getting 2 points isn't always easy with the Florida Panthers having a big lead, blowing it, and finding a way to win. This is a night where you just take the 2 points.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Tuesday, November 7th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News, and you can follow me on X at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. You can subscribe to the show on YouTube and anywhere you listen to podcast, and we are going to do our official drawing on Friday for your chance to win this hat with the Florida Panthers logo, Amerant Bank on the side, and the lettering, the official bank of the Florida Panthers. All you got to do is send in your screenshot of your subscription to the Locked On Florida Panthers YouTube channel to myself at MondoMan12 on X or on Instagram and X at LO_FLA Panthers. And before we get to our show today, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. And thankful on a day like today, even though it was a very stressful win for the Florida Panthers, getting 2 points in overtime against the Columbus Blue Jackets. We do have a special guest here on a Tuesday edition of the show. He is from the podcast that sometimes talks about Panthers hockey, but sometimes they don't. TJ Peterson from Panther Pourri, a Florida Hockey Now podcast. TJ, welcome to Locked On Panthers, your debut on the show, my friend.
Armando, it's beautiful to be here. Thank you for bringing me on to presumably talk about the ladder, some things other than Panthers. I mean, that Heat win tonight, that was really a crazy one. They just barely held on right at the end. I mean, that's definitely what's going on right now in South Florida sports, huh?
Yeah, and right now, the last time I checked, the New York Jets are losing 14-3 against the Los Angeles Chargers. So that's a good thing for South Florida sports fans.
That's
especially in the
true.
football scene. So great news. So yeah, the Florida Panthers get out to a 3-0 lead within the first 6 minutes of this game. Their first two shots go on goal, and it's funny because the Florida Panthers didn't even have a shot on goal with the first 2 minutes. They didn't even get zone time in the first 2 minutes, and then the Florida Panthers come out with an offensive explosion. Ryan Lomberg gets a goal on the back of Elvis Merzlikins. Their Panthers were puck retrieval was the name of the game in this one early on, as Sam Reinhart gets the puck, gets it to Gus Forsling, and then shoots it through traffic and all, and then a few minutes later, Rhino and Barkov in front, and then Sasha Barkov scores on the rebound, and even the Florida Panthers after that, all the lines were getting their opportunities on the night. TJ, even though the minutes were really crunched with the top nine, the fourth line didn't give up a single shot on goal in the whole entire game at 5-on-5. So incredible stat, even though with their limited minutes on the night. But it really came down to what the Columbus Blue Jackets did well towards the end part of the first period, and even in the middle part. They were closing in on the gaps. They were blocking shots because in the first period, TJ, Panthers had 31 shots on goal with 3 blocks. 31 shot attempts with 3 blocks. That number went up to 8, I believe, in the second period in all situations. What did you see as far as what the Columbus Blue Jackets did differently in that second period compared to the first?
I mean, the second period was so different from the first that it was kind of startling. I was prepared to answer what you were if you were gonna ask me just like how they came back from 3-0. In terms of the first period, I'll tell you real quick that they were very opportunistic, and they were, as they probably should have been, looking to create any kind of rush and odd man chances. And they were very effective on those. And, sometimes that's just how it goes. You shouldn't apologize for being really efficient. The Panthers aren't going to apologize for scoring on their first 2 shots on goal in the same kind of manner. And this is a team that plays with some effective size when it comes to guys like Adam Fantilli, 18 years old, throwing the body around with surprising effectiveness. It's really insane just how dominant he can be with his frame at that young age. I was supremely impressed with how he played, even though I don't know if he had a point. I can't tell you for sure either way. But just every time the puck was around him, he was making something happen. Even when he tried to get a little bit too fancy on Mike Riley, he was able to get the puck back using his brute force. And you saw a lot of that in this game with Columbus, getting some goals close to the net, being in position to capitalize on what was unfortunately a little bit of a bad Bob performance in terms of his rebound control. He's had a good year. He's had some performances that have really helped them win games. His last start, most notably, he gets the shutout in Detroit. And unfortunately, tonight wasn't that kind of night for Bob, but he was able to persist in a game that Columbus was really able to turn the tide. And as we were talking about, Florida was just completely dominant in the first 10, 15 minutes of the game. And Columbus ended up for the rest of the game being pretty much just as dominant. If you look at most of the advanced stats, they'll tell you that the chances, the shots on goal, or not the shots on goal, I guess, but the chances were pretty evenly spread for both teams. Columbus getting a lot of good opportunities even before they tied the game, even before they went up 4-3. Panthers kind of holding on, using their physicality, having responsible neutral zone play in a way that you weren't seeing in the first period. They just couldn't survive those minutes that the Panthers had the puck in the zone, and it really wasn't happening as much. The Blue Jackets were getting the puck in and around Sergei Bobrovsky, and they were keeping it there. And it was kind of breaking the camel's back with the last straw in a way, getting that third goal, because they were just piling on the pressure. And the fourth goal, I think, was kind of similar. They just took control of the game in a way that seemed completely impossible from the way the first 10 minutes went. And to the Panthers' credit, they were really, really pushing back hard in the last 4 minutes. And you kind of thought, well, that was such a spirited effort by Tkachuk and Barkov and OEL and Rodriguez. And now they're getting off the ice, and here comes the third or fourth lines. And man, how did we blow? Oh, look, Nick Cousins just tied the game.
He wasn't having the best game. He wasn't having the best game before that neither.
No, his line struggled a little bit more than that line with Lomberg and Lorentz and Lockwood, right? It's the 3L line, and they were throwing out L's to the Columbus Blue Jackets tonight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was with Stenlund and Etu Lustrainen on the night. And we saw uncharacteristic goals for the Panthers. We the broadcast and us on the Twitter, we're talking about, oh my goodness, what this Panthers team is doing defensively, not giving up odd man rushes, is definitely helping what they're doing, especially on their 5-on-5 numbers. But we saw two of those goals result from odd man rushes, and then the one that squeaked by with Karel Marchenko to make it a 3-3 at the time as well. And even on their one power play, man, the puck was moving. It was in the Blue Jackets zone, but man, the amount of misses we saw on the night as well on the Panthers power play as well. It wasn't just the Columbus Blue Jackets getting their shot blocks, but man, the Florida Panthers were really missing the net a lot on the night as well. I thought Anton Lundell had such a great start to the game. He was working well on the give and goes as well on the night as well. So definitely I really like that second line start for the Florida Panthers. Matthew Tkachuk ends up with 8 shots on goal on the night as well. Reinhart with 2 points, both of them being primary assists. And that Etu, Lundell, and Tkachuk line, even though they had a great start, there was a point where before the Columbus Blue Jackets even went up 4-3, they were on the ice for 2 consecutive minutes, just struggling to clear out of the zone as well for the Panthers. And Evan Rodriguez, right after the Columbus Blue Jackets had took the lead, had a great opportunity off a rebound and just missed the net. So there's so many opportunities that you could point to. That could have been the moment where the Florida Panthers had their opportunity and they failed to capitalize there as well for this team. And Bob Bobrovsky, man, he was getting bumped quite a lot on the night as well. I think his frustration is very justified. Rosalick got into his face as well, and Cole Sillinger, basically in the same sequence as the Florida Panthers were getting out of zone. Any thoughts on how Bobrovsky was treated on the night?
I mean, you could tell, especially like when the Jackets opened the scoring and the way that their third goal happened was pretty similar. They were targeting those rebounds, and I think a lot of teams will tend to do that. But since we view everything from like what are the Panthers doing to affect the outcome to tinted glasses, I'm led to believe like, oh, they thought that the weakness in Bob's game was his rebound control. So that's what they were going to try to target in order to score. So naturally, that means that they're going to be around him. And if he's moving from side to side or moving to challenge a shot, if somebody's there, there's a decent chance he's going to run into them, or they're going to accidentally on purpose run into him. And, that can not just interfere with the goalie in terms of like, oh, the puck's coming and he gets hit by the player. You can get your mind a little bit distracted, and it's such a mental game, goaltending, that something like that can have a big impact. I don't know if I would necessarily say like he got hit 10 seconds before a goal and he was still seeing stars, and that's why the goal went in. I mean, you can't blame him for the fourth goal whatsoever. And I'm trying to remember all of the goals. The third one and the first one where I felt the two that he could potentially be blamed for the most because of the rebound control not really being there. What happened on the second goal? I'm blanking.
The second one was an odd man rush. Broken
that's not on him at all.
Boone Jenner goes on a counterattack.
On the 3-on-1. Like if your team's giving up the 3-on-1, I don't care about what happens after that. Like, don't give up a 3-on-1. Simple as that.
Yeah. And Gabranson to that point had 2 points on the night. It's like, man, is this an Eric Gabranson revenge game? Damn it.
Is this Eric Gabranson or is this Eric Carlson? Which Eric are we watching?
I don't know if I want to put them in the same guys here, but thankfully the Florida Panthers come out with the 5-4 win. Nick Cousins, after Paul Maurice puts the extra attacker with 3:21, they score with about a minute left. And then the Panthers, after giving up quite a few rushes, they break up their own rush and then go the other way, where Carter Verhaeghe, Mr. Overtime, scores the game winner for his fourth goal of the season. Anton Lundell gets an assist on a primary assist on that one, but credit to Tkachuk for breaking up that rush in the first place to create that game winner. 2 points is 2 points. Yeah, it might hurt tie-breaking scenarios later on in the season, but we're not worried about that right now. We are worried about the 2 points for now. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we are going to discuss our 3 stars and when we thought this game was won or lost for the Florida Panthers, and ask a few, maybe a few more questions on the uncharacteristic goals that the Panthers gave up on the night. We're going to discuss that more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That is a $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use, a wide range of betting options. And if you want to take a break from betting on the Miami Dolphins, not only do they have a bye week, but based on their performance against winning teams, if you want to take a break from that, you could start betting on other teams on FanDuel. But once you have faith in them again, because they do have a favorable matchup coming up against the Las Vegas Raiders, then you could put them all on FanDuel. Spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So go to visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Segment number 2 here on this Tuesday, November 7th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Tuesday. I am with TJ Peterson, one of the 3 hosts of Panther Pourri, a Florida Hockey Now podcast. And TJ, I want to give you the floor first on your 3 stars of the game. Who are your 3 stars for this performance, even though it was a very stressful one with the Florida Panthers giving up 4 unanswered and finding a way to get the 2 points on the night. Oh, hold on. Let me unmute you. There you go.
You're telling me, Armando. I mean, God, I can't tell you how many times I thought that we had this in the bag, or if it was over, or if we had it in the bag again somehow, or if it was over again. And just a roller coaster ride that I don't think anything this season has really come close to. You kind of could tell from the first or second period of most of the games this year who was going to win. This is really the only one that's been kind of topsy-turvy in the way that it was. But I'll go ahead and start with my third star of the game. I'm going to give it to Ryan Lomberg. It's really for his entire line because I thought that Will Lockwood was real good. I thought that Steven Lorentz complimented him and Lomberg well. And Lomberg's the one that got on the score sheet, so naturally he's going to be one of the 3 stars. But just overall, that line kind of gets this whole star. But Lomberg, because you got to choose somebody. I'm going to give the second star to Sam Reinhart for his 2 primary assists and just overall having a really effective game in every capacity, making smart plays defensively on the penalty kill. There were a couple of moments there where you really noticed him. He's good in every aspect of this game. Like, he's known as a scorer. He's known for what he can do on the power play, especially, but you really notice his ability to win pucks on the walls and make the right passes from the defensive zone and just do the little things like that. Sam Reinhart should be appreciated by Florida Panthers fans while he's here, hopefully for a long time, but he does only have 1 more year on the contract, so who knows? And I don't know, this might be kind of a controversial choice. It certainly wouldn't be most nights, but I'm going to give my first star to Matthew Tkachuk. I just think that he deserved it for all of the effort that he was putting in. Like you said, the 8 shots on goal, and that doesn't even include, because it was a defensive play, the pass breakup that he had in overtime, sending it ahead to Lundell, getting that overtime winning goal started. I just thought that the Blue Jackets really had no answer for him defensively, other than just pray, pretty much get near the net and just hope it doesn't go in. That's pretty much the strategy. And somehow it worked for the majority of the game. But I just thought that he was looking really unstoppable for most of the time that he was on the ice.
Yeah. For me, on my third star is Matthew Tkachuk on the night. Sam Reinhart is second star, getting the two primary assists, and then number 1 for me is Carter Verhaeghe on the night. Mr. Overtime always finds a way to come out in the clutch in overtime. Carter Verhaeghe just continues to do it, and the fact that the Florida Panthers do have term on that contract as well. That's just a great thing for the Florida Panthers to just have on their roster. And you talk about how Sam Reinhart wins a lot of board battles as well. It's very tough on the puck, and it's funny because the Florida Panthers were having a hard time with that, especially in the corners. In the second period, where Columbus was really starting to just generate their chances, even though they only had one goal in the period on that power play, which power play PK percentage dipped a little bit on the night. But, when you consider the 5-on-5 numbers that the Florida Panthers put throughout the season, you'll take what you can get from that as well. And honorable mention for me is Ryan Lomberg. And when did you think this game was won or lost? In this case, won for the Panthers, because when I was just writing my notes, I was thinking right at 3-0, the Florida Panthers are going to come out with this win. Nope, not so much. I had to erase that automatically. And I thought it was when for me, it was when Nick Cousins scored that game tying goal off that Provorov turnover, when the Florida Panthers were just having a lot of zone time. And even before they entered the zone, there was a great effort by Oliver Ekman-Larsson to reach for the puck to prevent the Blue Jackets from clearing, even though they ended up clearing on that same with the extra attacker. Nick Cousins found a way to get a turnover off Provorov for that game tying goal. How about you? What was that moment where you said, this team has it?
I think it was at 3-0, but also at 2-0, and probably also at 1-0, given how early it happened. I mean, and after all of that, I just was thinking as it, went from 3-1, 3-2, 3-3. Everybody knows how it went. Just holding my hands up, thinking to myself, like, I have no idea where this is going. But I think the moment that it kind of crystallized for me, and I already mentioned it when I was talking about my first star of the game, when Tkachuk broke up the 2-on-1 in overtime, and you realize that, oh, wait, it's going to be going the other way, Lundell and Verhaeghe coming down the ice, that was when I thought that the game was won, because I had confidence in both of those guys. Lundell definitely needed to shoot in that position. The pass was being aggressively covered, and Lundell made the right decision to shoot. And that's part of why it was the right decision, because oftentimes a shot is just a more complicated pass, because the pass directly off of his stick would have been impossible with the position that the Blue Jackets defender was in. But if you use the goalie's pads as a little bit of a wall to ricochet off of, you can get it to Carter, and he can put it away in overtime like he's known to do.
Yeah, that hockey term, POP, pass off the pads, to get that game winner for Carter Verhaeghe there as well. And one other thing that I want to ask you is we've seen a lot of growth as far as someone like Anton Lundell on the season, which we just spoke about. And we also, there's something that when it comes to this Panthers team and when it comes to pinches in their own zone, maybe this is just a one game. Maybe I'm just wondering this as far as one game, but we saw quite a few times where the Panthers were irresponsible with their pinches. And I've been fairly impressed by Nico Mikkola, someone like him. But this one on the night, we saw a little bit of, not being responsible with his pinches and then leading the other way. Is that something that you would want to see him pipe down a little bit on when it comes to that?
And that's a tough one. Like early enough in the season, like I'm tempted to say no, because the way that this season has gone, it does feel like they've been really smart about it. And I think that Columbus just kind of had a good game plan. Like Pascal Vincent seemed to do a pretty good job of targeting areas that they were vulnerable. Look, I mean, Columbus didn't blow the 3-0 lead. That's where I want to go with this. Columbus really didn't play very well in the first 10 minutes of the game, put themselves in a very disadvantageous position. But from there, they were, dominating the game in a way that very few opponents have even been able to do to the Panthers for stretches. Mm-hmm. Like I can really count on one hand how many times that's happened. Game 2 against Winnipeg, the second period, Winnipeg was doing that. In Chicago, in the first and parts of the second period, Chicago was doing that for whatever reason. It's kind of odd. I felt like even in games the Panthers have lost this year, like against Minnesota, like against Vancouver, not to say that the Panthers were so dominant and they deserve to win those games, and how did they not win those games, but Columbus was showing me something that I didn't see out of Minnesota. I didn't see out of Vancouver. I didn't see out of Boston, one of the best teams in the league, one of the best records in the league right now. I never felt like they were in control of that game on a week ago. It's weird. It's weird to have Monday games in back-to-back weeks, but one week ago, I thought that was a game the Panthers were the better team start to finish. Tonight was not that. Columbus was pretty impressive, and it wasn't like the Gaudreaus. I did say Fantilli had a nice game, and it's not like Werenski played poorly. Laine didn't play, as far as I'm aware. I think he's still hurt.
Yep, he's still hurt from that Rasmus Anderson hit.
Yeah, that was a nasty one. Like
Gaudreau had 4 shots on goal on the night.
Yeah, you could see him doing some things on the power play, but at 5-on-5 is really where you saw the Blue Jackets taking it to him. And it was a lot of guys that, some of their names I can't even remember. We'll put it that way. Like Chinnikov and Texier were a part of doing some of the damage. And some guys I had never really even heard of. Like I'll go to Money Puck right now and I can look at some of the names and tell you if that sounds familiar. There was one guy in particular, I think it was Olivier, Matthew Olivier, 82% expected goals on the night. So that tells you that when he was on the ice, the Blue Jackets were getting pucks to Bobrovsky, and the opposite was not really happening.
Mm-hmm. No doubt. And They were, like you said, opportunistic, that the Columbus Blue Jackets were, and even the Florida Panthers. And credit to Martin when he came in relief, played a total ice time of 55 minutes and 17 seconds after Elvis Merzlikins was chased. But unfortunate that for him that the Florida Panthers found a way to get those the game tying and game winning goal on the night as the Florida Panthers come out with a 5-4 overtime victory against the Columbus Blue Jackets at home at Amerant Bank Arena before traveling to Washington. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we are going to provide an injury update to Brandon Montour and Aaron Ekblad. So stick with us here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. And a new NHL season brings all sorts of possibilities, whether it's whether it's Alexander Barkov scoring 50 goals and the Florida Panthers hoisting the Stanley Cup. And you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, and especially fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy contests. And you could choose studs like Alexander Barkov, Matthew Tkachuk, Connor McDavid, Alex Ovechkin, and Nathan McKinnon. And if they record more or less than their sleeper projections, like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more in any given game, you have a chance to win 100 times your bet on Sleeper. You need to correctly predict the outcome of 8-player stats. You heard me, Cats fans. You win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Segment number 3 here on this Tuesday, November 7th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Tuesday. I am with TJ Peterson, one of the 3 hosts of Panther Pourri, a Florida Hockey Now podcast. And we got some news on Monday morning. We knew that it was getting one step closer when we saw Aaron Ekblad and Brandon Montour in regular jerseys, not the gold non-contact jerseys. But Alex Baumgartner of the 5 Reasons Sports Network asked Paul Maurice this morning about what's the latest on the updates. Paul Maurice spoke about how their rehab has gone a lot better than we expected. We heard about the 6 months. Even one report said January as far as that. Bill Zito said December 15th at Media Day. Now it's looking a lot better, TJ. As Paul Maurice said that there is a possibility that one of them or both can be on the ice when the Florida Panthers do return from their California trip, which they will take next week in San Jose, then LA and Anaheim back-to-back on next Thursday and Friday. So that first home game would be against the Edmonton Oilers on November 20th, which which the Edmonton Oilers, they can bounce back at any time. They can come back to earth now at any moment. So, but the Florida Panthers are such a great opportunity with where our expectations were of how long they'd be. And of course, coaches aren't going to tip their hand and GMs aren't going to tip their hand on injury timelines. And we saw that with the Boston Bruins last year, even with their injuries. So how are you feeling hearing the news about the 2 blue liners for the Panthers coming back a lot earlier than we expected?
I mean, it's hard not to feel good about hearing that because games like tonight reminded you that this blue line is still a little bit thin. Like, credit to the guys for battling. You know, Mikhail Kulikov have both been playing above their salary so far this year. OEL's been pretty effective on the power play and had good moments, some bad moments too, but everybody does at 5-on-5. And, you know, Forsling is Forsling. You know exactly what you're getting out of him. Even on the third pairing, Uvis Balinskis has been a very welcome surprise. Josh Mahura continues to be a pretty steady third pairing guy. We saw Mike Riley come in tonight. He played his first game of the season. I mean, there's not too much negative to say about it, but also not a whole lot positive either. He was there. he did his job, made some nice outlet passes. You saw his puck moving ability. You also saw that he's a little bit light on the puck if he's pressured, and not exactly known for his 5-on-5 defense, but Mike Riley can give you something that you might need late in the game if you're down and you kind of got to get the puck from the D zone to the O zone as quickly as possible. That's something that Brandon Montour can also help with. And Aaron Ekblad is somebody that is going to be very effective no matter where the game is going on. He can score. He can shut guys down in front of his own goaltender. And both those guys were such a huge part of the run to the Stanley Cup final that, needless to say, they're going to be a big part of getting back there. And you want to say that like the important hockey is going to take place starting in April. So you want to make sure that they're ready to go before they step on the ice so that you don't sacrifice any potential availability or, maybe make them a little bit worse for wear when that important hockey comes around. This part of the season was always going to be about surviving. And I mean, that was really exemplified by the way the game went tonight. They survived. They didn't necessarily win that one emphatically. They survived. And I'm pretty happy with where they are because there's definitely a scenario where they could have been not necessarily looking like the Sharks, but having trouble outscoring their defensive problems. This is right now, the 6 guys that they're sending out on a nightly basis, one of the lowest paid defensive groups in the league. And you typically get what you pay for in this league. So the fact that they've been an average team so far, a little bit above average even, it's great knowing that we got those 2 guys coming back.
Yeah, and you think about right now with not all the games have gone final on the night on Monday, but 591 points percentage for the Panthers, which is when you take out all the games played and actual points. But when you look at just the percentages, the Panthers are third in the Atlantic Division as far as the percentages, as far as that. So still a lot of time as far as like making up games in hand and all that. We're not at that point where it's like, oh, the Panthers need to get must 2 points as far as catching up as far as to other teams. They're still very much in control, still have a pretty not necessarily favorable schedule coming up, because when you look ahead, I mean, Washington is a little older. Of course, they don't have Nicholas Backstrom right now. You have San Jose on the schedule, which hopefully that's not a trap game for the Panthers. The Anaheim Ducks are looking a lot better than expected coming into this season. Greg Cronin's got that team buzzing. I saw their comeback win against the Vegas Golden Knights just last night as well.
Former Cat Frank Vetrano with 9 goals among the league leaders. And
the Los Angeles Kings are figuring out with the top 2 centers and Quentin Byfield finding his game on the wing too. When you're looking ahead at the schedule, I mean, it's going to be a tough stretch for these next 5. And Andrei Svechnikov is back for the Carolina Hurricanes. It's going to be a little bit more of that survival from what you were saying. And if the Panthers, man, they go something along the lines of 3-2-0 in these next 5, so somewhere around there, I'm just throwing out a number. Then when you get to November 20th, it's like you can exhale there.
Yeah, I think that if you play 500 hockey up until the point that they come back, you're going to be okay with that because you've got a roster that you feel like you can go toe-to-toe with anybody. And I mean, last year they did have both of those guys and they did squeak into the playoffs. But I mean, we talked about it all year. Like they were just having weird problems turning shots into goals that they didn't really come around in the playoffs. Like we saw that was kind of an anomaly. It just seemed to happen unusually often. And it does in this league. Usually if you're scoring on 20% of your shots 5 games in a row, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen the next 5 games. And the same will happen if you're shooting 5%. That will probably come back to around 9-10% eventually, no matter which direction it's in. Cough, cough, Vancouver, kind of on that 20% end of the spectrum right now. But the offense is experiencing that a little bit right now, but they played so well defensively that they're able to win some games 2-1, 1-0, or 2-0. I guess it was in Detroit because of that empty netter. And however you get the points right now, because you're just surviving until those guys come back, and then you can ice out a defense that will complement your really strong forward core. And when Sam Bennett comes back, who's week to week right now, according to Paul Maurice, you'll really feel good about where every position on the ice is. Maybe we'll even see Spencer Knight back up in Sunrise, and he'll start performing at the level that we've seen him perform before, because, man, he's a promising young player, even if there's been a little bit of hiccups, a little bit of speed bumps in his professional career thus far.
Yeah, no doubt. And competition is something that we spoke about all summer, is that what's going to help the Florida Panthers get through as far as taking what they learned from the Stanley Cup final and just bringing it in, bringing new guys into the mix, it's more than just culture of just winning hockey games and all that, but it's all about the attitude when you walk into the building, holding each other accountable, how you communicate on the bench here and there. It's more than just wins and losses when it comes to culture and all. And the Florida Panthers, man, they are in such a great place. And Florida Panther fans, you guys out there, be thankful that the Florida Panthers really are, even though it was a little bit of a stressful one on the night. But TJ, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Very thankful for you to come here and make your debut on the show. Tell everybody where they can find you online, and tell them all about what you guys do at Panther Pourri.
Well, thanks again for having me, Armando. And yeah, you can follow us at Locked On Panthers. We're on YouTube at Locked On Panthers. No, just kidding. That's you. That's Armando. But he'll tell you all that in a moment, so maybe it's a little bit redundant. Yeah, everywhere on socials at Panther Pourri. My personal account is here on the video. If you're listening on the podcast, it's at Parallel Circle. A little bit of an irreverent account. I do most of my hockey tweeting from at Panther Pourri, but some hockey tweeting from at Parallel Circle as well. We're also on Instagram at Panther Pourri. Our website is pantherpourri.com. Our podcast is, as Armando has said, Panther Pourri, Florida Hockey Now presented. We talk about the Panthers every week. Me and my co-host Jake, who has also been on this show, and Alex Lopez. We also talk a little bit of non-Panther stuff at the end, hence the Pourri. We're on all the major podcast platforms. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and the other ones that I don't know about too, that our hosting platform just puts us on automatically. You can subscribe. Most episodes come out on Thursdays.
Awesome. TJ, thank you so much. And I hope to have you again soon, my friend.
That would be wonderful. Thank you for having me, Armando.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And every dayers, make sure you come back for tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, where it'll be a Winans Wednesday. Jacob Winans will be back on the show to preview the Florida Panthers matchup against the Washington Capitals. So I'm Armando Velez with TJ Peterson, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.